Hi friends, we're back. Welcome back to Occultists Anonymous. Wow, I haven't said this in a while.
Well,
Sponsored
how
by
about that?
Roll20 and our patrons who your names have been read today on the Geist video, so I'm not doing it. You'll have to wait until like March when I run Conan. But before we do that, we're playing Numenera. Ralph is going to get behind the. Is it GM in Numenera? What's
Yes.
yeah, the
Yes.
GM screen here and lead us into a game that none of us have played. Well, Ralph has played.
I've
Uh,
played
you
a little
played
bit,
Numenera? Okay.
very little bit.
Oh, okay. And
I
Ralph is
remember
flipped.
nothing though.
Ralph is actually normal. I do appear flipped. I will definitely change that because you need to be able to read about, beware of.
Well, I wear a collared shirt to trick people into believing I'm normal, but I'm actually a very peculiar individual,
Also fair.
as you might see
We
in the
know.
course of these.
We definitely know.
Yeah, to quote Doctor Who, weird is a side effect of awesome.
Hey, thank you.
It's a good one.
I feel so affirmed. I hope that I'll be able to validate that statement very much in the course of the numerous peculiar NPCs I plan to introduce, hoping that they will sufficiently pander to your respective preferences.
Yeah, this game, y'all, we make jokes about things that make Drew happy. There's literally an entire book
Oh, yeah.
Entire book
for
about
Drew.
building communities
Yes, it's
and crafting.
it's ridiculous. It's not, and let me be clear, and we're gonna get into this very shortly because I'm gonna turn it over to Ralph. But I just need to be very clear: there is a class for building shit. So yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The rest of these
It's
folks,
good.
they're gonna be great at like combat and doing stuff, and I'm just gonna be the guy with the wrench. So
Combat-ish.
yeah, Ralph, this is the floor is yours. So whatever kind of
Fantastic.
introduction and walkthrough you want to do, let's do it.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Drew. All right, everyone. Thank you everywhere that you are for listening to us, watching, joining us in this exploration of the ideas in our minds and the ideas we want to share with you. I am now responsible for conducting these intrepid individuals through a realm, a system, a setting called Numenera. And what I'd like to do is, for all of you, provide a meta review of various aspects of it so we can give you a thorough grounding in or I shouldn't say thorough, a sufficient grounding in what we're going to collectively trying to accomplish in this interactive game of storytelling. And then we're going to focus on the characters, okay, and the way that we want to tell the stories together. So, Numenera is a game produced by Monty Cook Games, Monty Cook of 3.5 fame or infamy, depending upon your attitude. It is one of my favorite games because it's based on a system. It's one of my favorite systems called the Cipher system. The Cipher system is a relatively simple mechanical system that lends itself well to rapid action in the context of interesting narrative. There are many, people say, rules-light systems out there that allow you to do things like this. I wouldn't call Cipher system a rules-light system because there still is quite a bit of crunch, quite a bit of mechanical granularity, both in the adjudication of random chance and in creating a character, which I find personally satisfying. However, the system for resolving actions is not so complex that it makes games last a long time just because you're trying to figure out what happened. It proceeds through relatively quickly, I think, as we'll all experience, and you all out there will witness. So Numenera is the specific setting using the Cipher system that is a mix of sci-fi and fantasy. It is intrinsically fantastical, however, based in a number of sci-fi tropes. It is set effectively 1 billion years in the future. Whether that's the future of our world or the future of another world, that's somewhat indeterminate. And to be honest, left up to the preferences of the group playing it and the GM telling the story, designing the story. It is set 1 billion years after a certain world was brought into creation, or more effectively, what you know is that the players, the setting, everyone involved in the story in the contemporary day are a billion years after 8 marvelous or terrible empires have come and gone. These 8 empires have accomplished many things, and they've lasted different lengths, different periods. Some have lasted perhaps only 1,000 years, and some have lasted many millions of years as galactic spacefaring empires. It is known without a doubt that at least one of them was capable of creating and destroying stars. At least one of them had powers over teleportation and existed interdimensionally. And at least one of them did horrible things to the Earth, yet also left marvels that still inform the actions of the people that live in this modern day and will influence the future to a great degree. 2 of the marvels or horrors that still exist are the Iron Wind and the Data Sphere. The first, the Iron Wind, is a constantly roving, voracious torrent of nanites that roams across the land, reshaping it into weird metallic crystalline structures of indeterminate function. If you are caught in the Iron Wind, your entire corpus will be remade into something you can't understand, and you won't be able to directly perceive because you'll now be a part of some weird metallic sculpture. It is something worth avoiding. It's constantly moving. Its original function is unknown, yet its current effect is witnessed in horror by all who see it. And then, in comparison to something so destructive or constructive, is the Data Sphere. This is Starlink a billion years in the future, a series of satellites that can provide answers to any question you could possibly pose about the universe. However, no one has consistent access. It is usually the case that people find or create devices that give them instantaneous connection to the data sphere such that they can pose one simple question. And they must be discreet about how they pose that question. Because if you ask a question that is too robust for the connection you've established with your device, you might not get the entirety of it back. And the information you get might be inscrutable.
And might be inscrutable anyway.
Yes, right. Exactly. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know how the data sphere is going to answer you. So that's a means by which a lot of information is economized in the course of this world. So before I describe the nature of civilization, I want to emphasize that there are 2 kinds of magic in this science fiction story. The first is a function or an application of Arthur C. Clarke's law that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, or virtually indistinguishable from magic. We're existing in a world where there are incredible technological marvels, most of which nobody knows how to work. Nobody knows how they understand. Some of this are standing there, most of which it's true. Nobody knows how they understand. There's a great deal that people have learned how to work, but there are still untold marvels buried beneath the earth, or just, I don't know, somewhere out in a desert. There is an ever-flowing cascade of water that you cannot drink, but is recognizably, clearly water of the purest form, somehow persisting, not evaporating. There are all kinds. What was it? Sorry.
I was going to say the book makes a big push to explain like even the technology that everyone has cobbled together to use is often not the original purpose of the device.
Yeah.
It's just you've sort of hacked it into, being a flamethrower, and it was, possibly just like a heating element of a house.
Or you've got a cell phone, you have no idea what it is, but you figured
Right.
out how to turn on the light.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So I've got a cell
there
phone,
was
super
one-
powerful, but it's just a flashlight.
That's
Describing one
right.
oddity that's just like a glass screen with pictures on it.
Yeah.
No one knows what this is, but you have it.
Yes, that's exactly it. And that's the second kind of magic in the setting. The second kind of magic is discovery. It is the satisfaction of curiosity. It is human ingenuity applied to give people a tenuous grasp on that which is nearly sublime, technologically sublime. So people are persisting in a world where they're trying to make do in what is effectively a medieval landscape that is anointed and adorned with the relics of technological empires. And people oftentimes cobble things together. Human beings are adaptive, not just humans, there are others in the setting, but the setting primarily functions on the actions and cooperation of human beings. And so the stories are mostly about this exploration of magic through a lack of understanding of advanced technology and the magic that occurs when curious individuals indulge that curiosity for the sake of an entire civilization. So the game Numenera is so named for the 4 basic kinds of technological objects. There are 4 real classes, 3 that are functional classes, and 4th that is a class of exclusion in a way. The first is artifacts. Artifacts are kinds of Numenera that either are sufficiently replicable, right? People have acquired the means to replicate them, or they occur in sufficient number and have been found and have a relatively consistent function and can last for longer than just a signal use. Either a battery that seems like it can't be depleted, or a sword of a kind, right? Armor, a heating element that actually functions to heat and is sufficiently comprehensible that people can allow it to function in its real capacity. People find these artifacts throughout the world. People can sometimes also appreciate the artifacts, particularly if they're part of that very rare and valued person type individual that Drew is going to tell us about. The second kind are ciphers. That is the ciphers lend their name to the system, the cipher system. These are one-time use devices that accomplish a discrete function and then stop working. Some individuals, through various means, can repower a cipher so that it can have an additional use. But generally, ciphers are the kind of thing you either cobble together, find somewhere, are gifted with, and they do things like help you treat a disease, launch something into orbit, literally yeet something into space up to a certain distance. Yeah, it's going to happen. They help you make a call. They, as I mentioned, allow you to contact the data sphere. They can create a bubble that gives you temporary protection against the iron wind. They can do all of these things, but they're temporary use. And the cipher system functions on the expectation that players are going to acquire ciphers and then use them for interesting purposes. Perhaps purposes that the GM and the story does not originally intend, but contribute to what is interesting about interactively constructing a narrative. The third, and these are actually my favorite, because I've found the most interesting things happen when people try and employ oddities the right way. So oddities are the third category. I'll share with you a brief example. I was playing in a Numenera game, and a friend and I found a dream rod. We found this rod, and this rod, when it contacts you, when you touch yourself with it or it contacts you, you suddenly begin daydreaming a really pleasant dream. It's a very simple, anodyne dream, like you're walking through a field of poppies, and there's sun out, and there's a wonderful wind. But that's the only thing you can concentrate on. So the GM thought that this would be a nice, fun oddity to include in a bag of things we got. But myself and my friend who are playing this game, if any of you have watched me exhibit any of my trademark silliness, would likely anticipate that what the GM did not, which is that my friend and I were definitely going to use this for stupid purposes. So what we started doing is interrupting people when they were talking with the dream rod. Whenever somebody would start saying something that we didn't like, we just touch them with the dream rod and they'd stop immediately and start daydreaming. And we were doing this so much and to each other when we talked that the GM got a little frustrated and had it stolen. And then we embarked on what ended up being a really interesting part of the story. We had to steal it back from them. And he eventually just had to disclose out of character, hey, this is so disruptive. I was trying to make this work in setting. You weren't supposed to succeed or didn't expect you to succeed. Can you guys just cut it out and do it every now and then? We're like, yeah, okay. But oddities are Numenera devices that are not one-time use, also don't really have an explicit mechanical function like artifacts, yet do something interesting. And there are ways that you can make use of peculiar technological artifacts, or it's not artifacts, oddities, peculiar Numenera that aren't super powerful, but are interesting, and they certainly contribute to the setting. And then the fourth, sorry, go ahead, Ash.
The default one for the Jack seems really offensively good.
Yeah? Which one's that?
It's like an imprisonment sphere.
Mm.
A little device, when you tap it on someone, it encloses them.
Oh, yeah. That can be pretty good.
It's very good to be just a simple thing.
Still got to touch them with it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's still ways to adjudicate how that works. It's pretty good. But I mean, there are disintegration spheres. So
Right.
It's relatively.
yeah, that's right. It's great. I think it's great, right? There's all kinds of things, right? There are, which I'll get into. I mean, there are ways of creating instantaneous quantum singularities, which Drew has already said is not going to happen. We'll see. I'm going to see how.
I mean, I'm not the DM here, so
I want somebody to make it happen. But yeah, that's great. That's a good example, Ash. There are objects that do things that would seem incredibly powerful and effective, right? Yet Numenera isn't a game of overwhelming your foes through physical might. That's certainly an important element of stories like these. So necessarily, there are characters that do that. However, it is a game about employing knowledge for the sake of advancing civilization. It is intrinsically a hopeful game, even though there are notes of sorrow and challenge. So the fourth category by exclusion, is drit. So an element that is constantly going throughout this narrative, a theme, is that even the most mighty and impressive statues, creations of society, of civilization, are eventually ground away into powder. And the entire world is covered in grit, which is artificial soil, effectively. It is the pulverized relics of forgotten empires. And every creature has their boots coated in the drit of that which people weren't able to understand before it was destroyed. So there are certainly incredible things that could perhaps secure the future that have been rendered into molecules on the ground that are now just the coating on the bottom of your feet. So there is that drive to try and find out as much as you can before you lose access to it forever. All right. I'm about to get into civilization, so I'll pause here in case there are any things that you all want to contribute or questions.
I'm good so far.
Okay, cool. So I mentioned civilization and this hopeful attitude, this fact that we're all trying to cooperate, right? Most of civilization exists in what's called the steadfast, which is a conglomeration of kingdoms or principalities that in a fantasy realm might be likened to Spain between 15 and 1800, right? Or any other fictional setting you want to think of, wherein there are a bunch of associated, independently ruled or governed political entities, states, polities, nations. Outside of that are the wilds. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
It made me think of the German states.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great example as well. Yes, fantastic. Outside of the steadfast are the wilds, that which is not part of some explicitly incorporated or ruled polity. Just not a wasteland, though, because much of it is jungles, forests, savanna, or desert. But again, these places are populated with technological marvels. So it isn't as though you're walking into a place that seems completely devoid of life or has never been touched by life. It might just not be controlled directly by some organized government. And there are people there. However, there is a place called the Beyond, which there are many fewer people there. And there are many reasons why people are fewer in number in the beyond. It is because the world, the ecosystem might have reclaimed so much of the area that it is nearly impassable. It could also be due to the fact that there's so much residual, inscrutable Numenera that it is challenging to penetrate the border. There might be sinkholes that randomly develop and close. You might suddenly get teleported elsewhere if you walk at the wrong pacing along a path. Various things that are really challenging to deal with. And in order to accommodate this and make it easier for humanity and civilization to get into it, the Order of Truth operates there. There's a group of what are called Aeon Priests, which are individuals, an organization that's devoted to the religious appreciation of the Numenera, what we learn about the past and the future through its understanding and observance. They are technological priests led by the Amber Pope, and many of them establish claves in the beyond. But because of their distance from the Amber Pope and the Order of Truth, they sometimes function in isolation. This would be an example of Catholic missions, devoid of the trappings and the experiences of us in history, right?
Mhm.
Think of them in the purpose and the expressed function of a mission, wherein you're going into a place to provide wisdom that you believe is going to aid and bolster a community. The claves in their isolation and their islands really function as safe harborage for those that are trudging through a challenging and very difficult experience. And that brings us to the last three, which serve as a counterpoint to humanity. Those are abhumans, visitants, and uplifts. So, the persistence of the Numenera has resulted in various kinds of mutation. Sometimes people survive the Iron Wind, and an entire community is transformed in a small way. Sometimes it's a large way. Sometimes exposure to radiation will result in people changing in form. There are things like goat people that are similar in form to Warhammer Beastmen, yet they have a different motivation. They're not devoted to a chaos god. There are groups of people who hate them. There are groups of people who love them, right? These are peculiar creatures who have motivations that are different than humanity, and as a consequence, they can naturally inspire all kinds of different feelings. There are visitants, creatures that are necessarily alien, extraterrestrial, certainly not of this world, yet they don't know where they came from, and they don't know how to get home. And humanity persists in relationship with them despite that. And then there are uplifts. There are indeed octopods, mammals, other animals that through the Numenera, through the progression of time, or some other means, have acquired limited or full sapience and sentience. Sometimes they're rare, sometimes they're plentiful, depending upon the context. But they persist along with humanity in this technological fantasy environment. All right, so that's a swift review of the setting. Then I'll provide a very short review of the mechanics, and then I'd like to spend the rest of the time with the three of you talking about your characters, if that's okay.
I mean, do we need to do mechanics today?
No, we don't. I can skip past it. Considering time, that's a good suggestion. Yeah. It's not. Cool. All right. So let's move on to it. So characters in Numenera are built quite simply. They're built from a descriptor, a type, and a focus. A descriptor, and what you're effectively building is an adjectival phrase, right? You have a noun, which is your type, which functions like a class, but isn't exactly a class. Your descriptor provides some flavor and additional abilities to your character, and your focus can provide a slightly different direction in which you could go with your character, or it can be a very satisfying complement to your character. It can enhance your character's type. So all of you have chosen a descriptor, type, and focus, and I'm going to be turning it over to you to describe how your type functions as well as your foci. And then whenever you, in the course of that, if you'd like, you can. We can start talking about the 3 questions, or I'll introduce them after you've talked about all your characters. It's entirely up to you. So I'd like to start with Chris, if that's okay.
Okay. I'm okay with that.
Sweet.
Yeah. One sec. So the sort of statement of who the character is just blank is a blank blank who blanks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I will be playing Reuven Relanala.
Ooh.
They are a rugged nano who shreds the walls of the world.
Just so everybody knows what kind of game you're getting into, that's a normal character.
Reuven was grew up as a young child on a farm before joining the ranks of the Glaives in their training. The Glaives are another class that are primarily warriors in one way or another, which we'll hear more about that from Craig. And in an incident with a piece of Numenera, Reuven fell out of the world deep into the data sphere, is how I'm picturing this. Y'all, I'm playing an isekai character.
A reverse isekai?
It's there and back again, A Hobbit's Tale.
So you got Isekai'd now back in your home world.
Yeah, I got hit by Truckcoon and then yeah, essentially fell into a remnant of a previous world, which is this mega hyper realistic fantasy game. Like full dive VR sort of thing. And became a sort of Eldritch Knight kind of character with some fighting and some magical spells and abilities and stuff like that. And at some point found an escape. In coming back, they have been changed. They are, for all intents and purposes, the character that they found themselves as in the game. And so their features are perhaps what in another game we might call a Dragonborn.
Ooh.
So they
awesome.
have this like iridescent sort of red scale that is you know, it maybe it's not always there. There is a, when I get to what the shreds the walls of the world thing is, like there is a visual like pixelization of their powers is how I'm picturing it. And so some of the like layered reality, essentially they've brought augmented reality back into the ninth world, is how I'm kind of threading it. So as a nano, that is kind of the wizard class, so to speak, of this game. And so I have essentially a mage armor and a magic missile. And at the second tier, I've picked up the esotery of hover. And so I can exert my will to sort of make myself weightless. And that implies that I can then do things like running and jumping and keeping my momentum going and stuff like that. Which I'm going to say is probably some dragon wings and dragon breaths and stuff like that. So like I'm very much leaning into this, like, I'm a fucking video game character that's now
in real life.
Yeah. And the shreds of the walls of the world lets you sort of dip down into some other dimension, right? And so I'm saying that's back into the game just a little bit.
You're wall hacking.
I'm wall hacking, exactly. I can't actually wall hack yet.
Oh.
That's a tier 3.
It's coming.
But you can essentially like dip out of phase and run and like do some kitty pride shit eventually. And I have an ability called Scratch Existence, where I can like leave a trail where like traveling through the world through this other dimension like causes damage in my wake and stuff like that. And so yeah, gonna do some bullshit for sure.
Hell yeah.
No, there is also a kitty pride focus.
Yeah, for
Which
sure.
just exists partially out of phase. It's like walking through
Mhm.
walls and shit.
Yeah. I saw that one and then was thinking about it, and then saw the shreds the walls as more of like an offensive version of this, and so this sort of Eldritch Knight kind of might and intellect sort of thing kind of spoke to me. Ralph mentioned those 3 questions, and I at least wanted to answer the last one off the bat.
Sure,
Which
go right
is that
ahead.
every life is fundamentally a journey in self-discovery. What insights about yourself do you hope to find within the arcane wisdom of a bygone age? And I said, I hope to find meaning in this third life I live, forever changed by what has happened to me. Forged anew in the data of a previous civilization, I shall discover the truths of the world in the gaps I slip through at a mere thought.
Oh yeah. Wonderful.
It sounds like you're really not into this, Chris. Like, are
Nope,
you
not into it at all. I actually wrote that sentence during the break, so like that was just I don't know. I felt good about it.
Dope.
That's great. Who would like to go next? Craig?
I can go, sure.
Wonderful.
I am playing Blaze with a YSE on the end. Blaze Ron is a graceful glaive who needs no weapons.
Yes.
He tends to go shirtless in the world unless there's a particular compelling reason that he would need to don clothing. And his body is covered in these metallic tattoos. They have sort of a shimmer to them when you're looking at them, but when he turns on the juice, they actually glow like a silvery white light. And they're like on his arms, and his fists become lethal weapons. He doesn't have any kind of weaponry except for a metal disc that he carries on his hip that he can charge as if it was his own fists and throw at people. So you get this silver spinning light, kind of like a Tron disc was the imaging that we had. He's very light on his feet and very quick, very focused on speed and agility. The needs no weapons means his unarmed combat is significantly boosted. So he does more damage without a weapon in his hand than if he were to actually pick one up. He's also been trained to not need to wear any armor. He has, through dexterity and the reinforcement of his psychic energy provided by the tattoos, he's able to harden himself to not need to have protective gear on, which allows him to maintain his lightness on his feet and things like that. This is definitely a frontline, in your face, mucking shit up with his fists sort of character.
Proud of you.
He was raised in a clave a long way away, very isolated, with a group of monks who have devoted themselves to mastering their bodies. They have a fragment of an epic poem that talks about this individual who just by their very presence wars would stop. They wandered about the world bringing justice and death. And poetic justice, like justice. They weren't beholden to any organization or country or laws. They knew what was right and wrong, and they sort of kind of like a Judge Dredd sort of figure.
Always followed by a blue box.
No.
Okay.
I don't get the reference, but that's okay.
Doctor Who.
Oh.
You just described like a word for word thing that has been said about the Doctor.
Okay. And part of what they do is they're trying to seek the idea behind these guys is that all the other civilizations that have gone before have all ended in dust and ash and ruin. And the idea is that maybe it's the technology advancement and people's reliance on it that led to those downfalls. So they seek to improve themselves to not need that technology so that they might survive the next apocalypse.
Oh, interesting.
And sort of bridge the gap kind of thing, or maybe even prevent the
Numenera
next one from
Luddites.
coming. Yeah, not necessarily Luddites. They use it, but they have trained themselves not to rely on it.
Because tattoos are likely an application of the Numenera, for
Yeah,
example.
probably. Mm-hmm.
So it makes
And they
sense.
don't necessarily acknowledge that. For them, it's just something that they've done for thousands of years in their lore. So it's quite very likely could be a Numenera application stuff, but they don't think of it that way. It just helps them focus their internal energy, their chi, I guess, if you want to call it that. And that's for the questions. Or did I miss anything else that we want to cover?
Up to you. That was wonderful.
Yeah, so for the questions, it's mostly based around that idea that they want to transcend the requirement, like transcend the ability or the necessity of Numenera to be able to exist outside of that. So they're always seeking to improve themselves. And the best way they know to improve themselves is to test themselves against greater and greater foes. So they become stronger in their spiritual reserves, their internal energy becomes more focused. So that's kind of where they journey. Once they're deemed ready, they leave the clave and journey out into the world to bring justice to the masses, so to speak, as independent arbiters sort of have the role they see. Other civilizations may not necessarily see it that way, right? Some might view them as vigilantes. Others might see them as a source of stability in certain terms, depending on how much they know about them. But sort of a Judge Dredd, law to the lawless, sort of when they leave the clave. His goal is to achieve a spiritual enlightenment, and then bring that information back to the clave to help elevate the rest of his brothers. He has no idea who his family is, other than the monks in the monastery. They don't talk about where people come from or where they get new trainees in the clave. They just sort of you're brought up. Some of your first memories are being in the clave, and doing your training, but there's no necessarily maternal or paternal figure in your life, and that's something he hasn't really thought about much. It's the only life he knew until he left, and now there's other people that talked about mothers and fathers and families and things like that. To him, the monastery is his family.
Yeah.
People want to know, where do you acquire the children?
It never occurred to him to ask, but maybe that's something that might come up. But we'll see.
Well, note something, Greg, you did well, implying I liked, is that there's a distinction between the technology that people use, implement, create in their own, and truly arcane Numenera. In that once it seems that people collectively have ownership over the function of a particular kind of device, they can create it themselves, they've renamed it, it suddenly is less magical, less arcane. It's more familiar. So if you've incorporated the use of something into your culture over the course of, 1,000 years, right, then it isn't something strange. It loses that aspect that Clark's law suggests that it has, right? When it is intelligible, once you figure out how to use something, it's no longer magic. It just becomes, in effect, a mundane thing that's a part of your life. So there is a certain casualty that happens in the course of stories like these, wherein the things that we appeal to understand, the things that are magical and incredible, eventually become mundane and sometimes forgettable because they're just things you deal with all the time.
Ooh, I like that, because your civilization or culture may only understand some minor aspect of a thing, but because it's familiar, you stop investigating it.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
All right. Thank you, Greg. So, Drew Ash, which of you would prefer to go next?
I can go.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you.
I'm playing Vet. Where's my little thing? Oh, is a clever Jack who commands mental powers. For backstory, I have Jacks are like the jack of all trades, right? You're kind of good at most things, You can specialize beyond that, but they start being decent. And they have a few different ways in which they got that way. And so the one I picked for her was School of Hard Knocks. She is essentially a street rat who is clever and charismatic and sort of worked her way into being a fixture of her community.
Fantastic.
What was
I want you to know I'm singing the Aladdin song in my head now.
I realized partway through with the whole backstory I had built from, I've just created Mission Val, but that's okay. Her main motivations are, first off, looking out for herself, honestly, because that's the only way she's still alive at this point. But then also trying to uplift her people. If we can work more with this weird arcane tech and such, that we can all rise. The backstory thing I rolled for her was that she had saved a noble's kid from a fire, and they think highly of her because of that. She's got lots of charismatic deception, persuasion abilities. Her mental powers are telepathy and mind reading, unlocked via some drugs in a puzzle box she stole from a guy. Because again, she is generally a street rat, nicked it off of a traveling salesman who had some weird little esoteric oddities, and got in the right state of mind one night and unlocked her third eye or whatever. So yeah, now she can read minds. It's fine. That happens to people.
I mean, to be fair, yeah.
It does, yeah.
I mean, how high were you that you wake up and you're able to read minds?
Listen, the right strain, a good Rubik's Cube, you too can learn telepathy and mind reading.
When Ash is done, I'll tell you about something in reality that's a terrible alternative to that.
And yeah, that is roughly what I've got for her. Just sort of a scrappy urchin who is trying to be more.
Hmm.
I'm trying to see, do I have any other neat abilities? Oh, she has Jax get tricks of the trade instead of esoteries. So I've got a critter companion, which is just an animal you've got a bond with that listens to you. I've got that, and then link senses, which if you touch something, you can share senses with them. So it could be with other people. It's also going to be with my rat.
Yeah.
And encouraging presence, which is when other people are making rolls around her, they can get a bonus to it. Just from her hyping you up, basically.
Fantastic. Did you want to answer any of the questions, or would you like to wait?
I mean, the first one, her opinions she's very hopeful and optimistic. It's 8 mighty empires have come before, yet rather than standing on the shoulders of giants, we trudge through their bones, slack-jawed and aghast. Are there great things to come, or are we soon destined to join our predecessors as silent reminders of glory and decay? She's trying to ascend, and she wants to take everyone up with her. Yeah, ultimately very hopeful that we can be better than this. We can build on this. All things end eventually, but it doesn't have to end for us.
Ooh, Yeah, I
I'm
like that.
so looking forward to the character interaction.
That's great.
Also, your whole law for the lawless thing. I do a lot of crime,
That's
so
great.
we'll see how that works.
It's,
I love
it's
crime.
and this is going to be fun to sort out, but this depends on your view of justice.
Right.
Who are you doing those crimes against, and why? And that's going to be fun to explore.
So Vet is the Jack type, so named for the Jack of the setting, who climbed high on the beanstalk, which is an actual installation construct in the wilds, a gleaming tower of glass and metal with a stalk only a few inches thick, but 10 feet wide that reaches into the heavens. And people don't know where it ends. So it has been said that all Jacks eventually aspire to climb the beanstalk and perhaps find the original Jack. That's totally not a requirement, but that's a setting accent for those of you wondering if the name Jack refers to anything other than just Jack of all trades. There was a Jack who climbed the beanstalk, and is this Jack around still? We don't know.
Or a figure remembered as Jack.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, it mentions the
That's
book's
right.
like the hero of every story, which just happens to be named Jack.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Jack and Jill went down the hill. Jack the Beanstalk. Jack, yeah.
I mean, it's possible that this person was named something else before they climbed the beanstalk, and as a consequence, they were able to influence all stories in perpetuity to include them as a protagonist. Who knows, right?
Yep.
I don't know. Maybe we'll find out. All right, Drew.
Yeah. So I am playing Faye, though that's not his full name. His full name is Hephaestus, which a lot of people reduce down to Festus. Nobody ever shrinks it down to Hef. Weird, but yeah. So for some people, like, the formal name you really want to get his attention, it's Festus, but most people just like it's just easier to just say Faye. He answers to all of them. But he is a prepared right who builds the future, or excuse me, builds tomorrow, technically. So yes, he is a right, which is literally the class that builds things. There are 3 additional classes besides the 3 that you've already heard that are more towards building communities and making things. And so there's basically a community leader class. There's the right who makes things, and then there's a salvager kind of class. So they're a little bit deviated from the base 3. But yeah, I'm playing Faye, who's a right. Who, yeah, he builds things, makes things, tinkers with things, amusingly, and I have not heard Craig's character description until now, so this makes this really interesting. His background is mechanical indoctrination, wherein he was part of a group called the Convergence, who are not nice people, and that's also part of his background, and we'll get into that some other time. But yeah, he, similar to Blaze, also does not wear armor, but that's mostly because he isn't trained in it. But he happily shows off all these metal plugs and sockets that are all over him. He's got like wiring and circuitry into his skin. Because yeah, I mean, from the age of like birth until puberty started to hit in, he was hooked up to machines, getting injected with mechanical aptitudes and engineering and knowledge and all sorts of stuff. And some people failed and died, and somehow Faye made it through, and he just has a natural aptitude for building things and taking things apart. And initially, from say 13 on to mid-20s, he was, just a happy little worker bee, and then started to get a little upset when he realized how shitty the Convergence was. And yes, Craig.
So for visual, are they like the Banuk shaman from Horizon Zero Dawn with like cabling wired into their
No, there's no current,
stuff?
like not that kind
Right.
of cabling, but more like the cyberpunk EMP
Okay, data
threading and
ports.
stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Or Matrix ports.
Yeah, I was thinking Matrix, like jacked in and learning
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
skills and
Yep.
stuff.
But yeah, he does not wear much in the way of torso coverings unless it's like really cold and he has to. But he shows.
Oh, we're
this
gonna get
stuff-
along great.
Oh yeah, no, you and I were. Oh yeah. So he shows off his stuff like proudly, because like nope, he's now into his like late 50s, but he has like Master Roshi bod, right? Where it's like the old man tight muscle kind of stuff. He's not great in a fight, but he does have 14 might.
Great.
So,
Pretty good to me.
Yeah, no, his stats are kind of wacky. But he's not good at anything other than pulling stuff apart. But yeah, so he happily shows that stuff off. But yeah, somewhere in that like 20s to 30s range, you realize that the convergence kind of sucks and basically departed. And he still knows a couple folks over there. And as far as he is aware, things were broken off amicably. But he left all the little seed plans and all the. It's like, I'm not taking anything, guys. I'm just leaving. I finished all my work. Here's my 2-week notice. I'm out. And scooted off, and now he kind of roams, and he kind of like the itinerant lawman, but instead he shows up and goes, guys, your wall is falling down. This is just not going to stand, and then just stays there for a month or two, just like, feed me, plug in like nutrient paste into the port right here, and I'm just going to fix this. And then I can leave, because otherwise it's an eyesore and I can't handle it. Oh, which actually brought up, Ash, are you still using a dart thrower?
No, I was going to get the buzzer instead.
Okay. Is anybody using a dart thrower? I didn't think so. Okay, never mind that. I had a passing thought about, that dart thrower, that's mine now. You could have my old one that I improved. And then here in a couple months, he will absentmindedly go, yours could use some updates, and swap. And so this could, but he's just a little bit not all there. His thinking process is a little absent-minded professor, little, what is it from Blubber?
Nutty Professor?
No. The Robin Williams character in Blubber.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, it's all the same base.
But yeah, he's just kind of a little bit absent-minded and can be easily distracted by shiny things and pulling them apart. And he loves technology. Yeah. And so he is the Nega Blaze. So
I think there's a great tie-in for some of the choices and stuff for connections for you and me.
I know. I was like, oh my god, Greg. So yeah. And yeah, his whole thing is making stuff. So I have a list of plans and ciphers that I can make if we have enough time, and I can scavenge some more IO. But yeah, he's got a dart thrower, which technically is his primary weapon, at least as far as anybody else sees, but he also uses the energy of IO, the weird energy radiation stuff, and shoots beams of energy at people.
Cool.
Yep.
He's Iron Man.
No. Actually, based on, and let's be honest, folks, in case you haven't noticed my predilection for particular characters, he does have the plans for Living Armor Sheath and Tendril Graft. So if we're here long enough, Tendril Graft takes, what was it, Ralph, like months to make? But yes, just give me some time, folks.
That'll be something we'll be discussing in probably about 10 minutes. So,
well, 10 minutes will be after our time.
Oh, I figured we were going to go a little longer. No worries, we don't have to.
Yeah, that'll be up.
Considering we are splitting it up, that's totally fine. Then it can happen sooner than that. I will briefly mention. Sorry, Drew, unless there's more you'd like to say. The thing I was going to mention as a humorous aside, inspired by Ash's character, is that there is, in truth, a manner in which people affect themselves permanently through intoxication. In Afghanistan and some other areas, forgive me if I've mentioned this to you all before, there are some people who occasionally will mix scorpions with opium and tobacco and then smoke it. And the combusted venom and opium together often has as its most likely consequence, especially if you consume the amount that most people do, permanent and irreversible insanity. And you hallucinate for the rest of your life if you do not die. So,
Why?
why do people do it? Because getting high feels good. That's why. The insanity is an after product. So, like the venom is exhilarating, right? Enough venom is probably going to put you into a physiological state that feels rather intense and good. And the
But then
opium,
it just
of
never
course.
stops.
Yes, exactly. And then 8 hours later, 12 hours later, after you take a nap, you wake up and everything seems different and it never goes away. So, no good. But
I
people
remember
continue
you and
to
I
do it.
talking about that, and I was like, is that
Yeah.
what he's going to bring up?
Yeah, I mean, that's not surprising. Smoking
Yeah.
opium and scorpion venom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just grind up the scorpions.
Word.
It works. All right, so I will summarize something briefly, share those questions, and then we can all decide on one aspect of it before we wrap things up. So there were 4 character types mentioned here, everybody out there. Those were Glaive, Jack, and Nano, and then Wright. In the first book, there are 2 main books for Numenera in its current incarnation, Discovery and Destiny. Discovery is the main first book that people encounter. Destiny has additional rules, additional types, and additional ways you can take a story. The Glaives are a fighty type. They solve a lot of problems through physical might, hence why their selected abilities are called fighting moves. The Jacks are a versatile type, that kind of transition between a Glaive and a Nano. You can make a more fighting-oriented Jack, or you can make a more esoteric-oriented Jack, like a Nano. Jacks use tricks of the trade. Nanos have abilities that are often based in their intellect that allow them to do things like telekinesis, shoot beams, or this is their primary responsibility in most groups and setting, is actually understanding the Numenera. So the Jacks oftentimes have a better facility for comprehending Numenera and employing its use in different contexts. And then the Wrights, just like many other words we use to refer to someone's occupation where they fix things or design things, they are responsible for creating new things in a civilization, and in particular, moving past the point at which the Numenera is just arcane to the point at which it becomes a mundane aspect of our culture. So by our, I mean everyone in the setting, not us, but those in the story. So there were 3 questions that I wrote and posed to the players as a way of sculpting the narrative and contributing to the themes, and the degree to which we all involve them is going to vary depending upon player actions, because Numenera and Cypher System as well is intrinsically player focused. Right, the one aspect of the mechanics I'll say right now briefly is that the GM never makes any rolls. No NPCs make any rolls. Circumstances are posed to the players and then they make a roll. For example, in a fight, if an enemy is trying to hit a player, right, a player character, the enemy will prompt the player character to make a defense roll, an appropriate one, speed, might, or intellect. If the player, of course, wants to hit an enemy, the enemy does not make a defense roll. The player makes an attack roll, and then the result of that attack roll determines what happens. And the aspect of that I find really satisfying is that the GM's responsibility is primarily to sculpt encounters in which the players can exhibit their interesting abilities and affect the narrative. There's one aspect of it that leads to how XP is awarded, and that's called GM intrusions. So in situations where the GM thinks including something might make the narrative a little more interesting, they can intercede in the narrative and interrupt what a player has chosen to do or what the outcome might be and offer the player 2 experience points. One that they get to keep and one that they have to offer to another player, either a player whose character has helped them in the event or in memory and appreciation for something that someone did previously. The player can reject GM intrusions by spending 1 XP. And you can also use XP to reroll rolls if you so choose. However, after this session and in the course of the game, we'll talk about a variant that some people prefer, in case that's something that the 5 of us would like more than what the default rules are. So you get XP in the setting through discovery exclusively, other than the GM intrusions. So you don't get XP for defeating enemies. You don't get XP for getting loot other than artifacts, right? But it's not exactly the same. You don't get XP for surviving. You get XP for indulging your curiosity and finding interesting Numenera. Because that is the drive. The drive is to incorporate this aspect into the story, and some will involve your characters' respective interests in advancing yourselves and civilization through pursuit of the Numenera. So the degree to which that theme is going to be evident and specific, I wanted to prompt through 3 questions, which for the audience, I'll share with you what they are. 2 of them are already dealt with. You all read them off, but I just want to read them in sequence again so that you're all familiar with what they are. The first is, 8 mighty empires have come before. Yet, rather than standing on the shoulders of giants, we trudge through their bones, slack-jawed and aghast. Are there great things to come, or are we soon destined to join our predecessors as silent reminders of glory and decay? The second question is, the world is a vast place, filled with innumerably diverse people who rarely agree on the truths we might squeeze from the relics of the past. How can we decide who gets to read the Rosetta Stone when every touch causes it to wither into oblivion? And the third, every life is fundamentally a journey in self-discovery. What insights about yourself do you hope to find within the arcane wisdom of a bygone age? All right, and with that, the last thing I'd like to briefly discuss for the sake of the audience, because there might be feedback about this, is there are 2 ways that I have thought of taking the campaign. One which I think is more consistent with your characters, and another which, is a standard thing. The first is it will proceed in connected fashion. Oh, sorry, that's out of order. So, hold on. The standard way that people take Numenera is you start out somewhere with some motivation for approaching these artifacts or investigating the unknown. And then it can choose your own adventure, go in a bunch of random directions, right? The second alternative, which is one I think might be more appropriate for this setting and the characters you all have, is more episodic. Focused on your connection with perhaps an initial patron. You will go out in pursuit of the Numenera, and there will, of course, be a reason by which you're connected, because we haven't explored those aspects of character creation yet. And then, in the interim, there'll be a wrap-up and conclusion, a narrative description of what happened that we were left off at in the course of the sessions, and there will be time that passes between one and another. This would explicitly be a means by which a write would be able to contribute to different aspects, right? Because in a conventional game, unless the campaign is lengthy, a write generally isn't going to have time to create more than one artifact. And also, there often isn't time by which you can ascend tiers, acquire new abilities, or explore different aspects of the narrative. So I'm just curious what you all think you would prefer about the way we approach this.
I mean, because I know the right is kind of the oddball out here, I am A-okay just having an adventure, and not worrying too much about downtime to make an artifact or anything like that. I have those. I'm here mostly to pull apart Numenera and machinery, scoop up some IO, make some ciphers, shoot things with my dart gun.
All right.
Adventure mechanic.
Yeah. I'm a walking loot machine. I pull things apart. That's how I built the character, and less about building stuff. Naturally, the right build stuff good anyways. Words good really well too. So I'm on board, for a more traditional exploration kind of discovery thing. If we want to do some like random somewhere in here, there's a time to do like hey, we're going to do a short time skip and I can make our automatic cooker, that'd be
Mhm.
cool. That should only take me like a week or two. But yeah.
I kind of like the
Okay.
idea of like vignettes in a larger, more epic arc. If that, because I think that's kind of what you're pitching at
That
us.
is. Yeah, that is. Yeah. As an option.
Kind of,
Yes.
it'd be interesting to see how these characters develop and stuff. A little bit. Like I'm not that familiar with the system, so that would be entertaining for me to explore how that works. But I'm okay with just doing the more one shot format kind of thing as well.
Okay.
I would like to be able to go up at least one more tier because I get some cool abilities at tier 3
You do.
that I think would be
Quite
fun to
true.
play with.
They are.
Yeah, I think if you're pitching the possibility of a almost sort of Forged in the Dark kind of style of like an adventure, a vignette, as Craig called it, like each session is wholly contained, more or less,
Yes.
within itself. I think
Yeah.
that could be cool. There's ways you can weave and build a plot overarching between those, right? That's not too
That's
hard. And
right.
then you have some options of touching on some downtime, some community building, some NPCs and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Which is, I think, pretty cool. Time to do adventuring things and also be present in a setting or in part of the setting in which some role playing is more likely to occur versus some of your traditional D&D type things of like you end up rolling a lot of dice and doing a lot of fighting.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. It seems like you're all in support of that more episodic, vignette-based structure.
I get to make more items then. So yeah.
I'm intrigued by it, and yeah, if that's if that matches with a style of DMing you're comfortable with and a campaign you'd like to run, then yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I think it'll work well, especially because the aspect of Numenera and the cipher system, by extension, that is somewhat fun, is how much of the technology do you get to play with?
Right.
So, in the course of bringing back artifacts, ciphers, downtime, narrative expansion, it can lead to more justification or more description of ways in which your characters have changed and cool ways to do it. And that also gives interesting narrative justification for what would seem like an otherwise unexpectedly quick character progression, mechanical progression. And that does not intimidate me at all, ascending tiers more quickly, I think, especially in the context of us reviewing Numenera for the audience and for ourselves. It actually would be better if you're able to play with more of the mechanics.
Heck yeah.
So, all right, wonderful, great.
And just for my sake, and because I know the community is going to want to know, I believe we're not going to be doing this until like December 9th.
I think that's
Because
right.
next week is Thanksgiving. The week after that is PAX Unplugged, so I will not be around. So for folks at home, you got a little bit of time to catch up on Geist or 160 episodes of The Rookery, or finally dip your toe in and watch the Richmond game and watch Craig kill Redacted. Because that was a thing.
He
Vicar.
don't kill nobody.
Vicar,
He don't
yeah.
kill nobody.
Craig has
Vicar
killed no
doesn't kill
one.
nobody.
Yeah.
Vicar just gives somebody an option to, I don't know, be different.
Walk away.
It's a different experience.
Yeah. So, yeah. So thank you all for joining us for this. Also, because this will go up on YouTube with plenty of time, if you all have feedback, questions, stuff like that, please drop it into the comments on the YouTubes. Or better yet, come by Discord, www.eatinto.space. We have a Numenera chat, so you can drop questions in there, and we can chat about stuff. Obviously, some of us are new to this, but we'll happily tell you about our characters. I will give you, if you want to know, I'll give you my entire list of the different things that I can make. I'm just gonna just so everybody's aware, like there's one called a magnetic attack drill. There's some shit in this game, y'all.
It's a good time. I'm hoping that somebody gets a cipher the orbital launcher. Before we leave, I had a character who, well, launched a certain entity into space with an orbital launcher at one point in the past.
You'd love to see it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping.
And if you love to see it, come check it out at eatin2.space.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, I make random ciphers with that always tinkering thing, so it may come up.
Mhm.
That is one of the other fun things. Is just like, oh yeah, with 1 hour, here's a new cipher, guys. It's
Mhm.
gonna fall apart real fast, and I can't hand it to any of you, but let's see what it
Yeah.
does. Yeah. So thank you all for joining us. If you do want to support us monetarily, that's patreon.com/Occultists Anonymous or www.staylucky.club. Because we're gonna start figuring out art for mage characters coming soon, TM, as we return to Into the West in a little while. Otherwise, we'll see you all around.
Stay curious,
Bye-bye.
everybody.